After my Mario 64 ranking, I was actually hoping to follow it up with a video on Banjo-Kazooie, but it's taking a bit longer to put together than I anticipated. So instead, I figured I'd talk about something smaller. And by smaller, I mean an indie game that drew heavy inspiration from Banjo. You could even say it was made by the same hands. Not those ones. There we go. Yooka-Laylee feels like one of those games that should be better than what it actually is. You have a game that was developed by former Rare employees including Chris Sutherland, Steve Mayles, Gavin Price, and Grant Kirkhope among others. The game was funded through Kickstarter in 2015 and would be released 2 years later. Now, I wasn't there during the game's initial release or discussion, since I haven't touched on Banjo-Kazooie until around early 2018 or late 2019, just before Banjo and Kazooie would join the Smash Ultimate roster, and later in 2021 when I got to try out the original Banjo-Kazooie via Rare Replay. But that's a topic for another video. Anyways, it wouldn't be until the holiday of 2024 when I got my hands on Yooka-Laylee off Steam for a discount. Upon first completion, I found myself really liking it, but I could definitely see some of the flaws of it. The world suffered from being a bit too large, and yet they didn't take advantage of it. Like they learned nothing from Banjo-Tooie. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. They did attempt to circumvent it by increasing the pagey count to 25 and the quill count to 200 per world, to make it feel like you're collecting more stuff at a consistent rate. But upon recent playthroughs, I've realized that before the tome expansions, you're only able to collect around half of each world's collectibles. Not helped by the fact that some collectibles aren't available for you to get upon your first visit, as they require moves you learn later in the game. But unlike Banjo-Tooie, the tome expansions incentivize you to come back to each world on the second visit without it feeling like you're just in and out within seconds. So I'll give it that. Unfortunately, these large worlds also lack a map and even warp features, yet Tooie had the latter. I wouldn't have the problem with the lack of a map because the layouts of the world can be engraved in my mind, especially after playing it so many times. But not everyone's gonna have the same luxury. On top of that, your method of fast travel is locked to a power meter, and while I never ran into an issue with it that negatively impacted the gameplay, in fact there is one section where I think they did something interesting with it, I can understand why some people weren't a fan of it. There's also been some issues upon release, but to reiterate, I wasn't there and they've been patched out since then, so I can't comment on that. Overall, I find Yooka-Laylee to fall in the category of good but flawed. I had some fun playing through this game, but when compared to its predecessors and or competition, especially from that year, it doesn't really hold a candlestick. And it seems Playtonic happens to agree with that, as 8 years later, they gave us, well, probably the best game with the dumbest title. Yooka-Replaylee was Playtonic's second attempt at trying to recapture the classic feel of a 3D collectathon platformer to a modern audience. And after playing it a couple times, I could say they not only succeeded, but I'd argue they exceeded it. While not the best of its kind, Yooka-Replaylee introduces a bunch of quality of life improvements and changes to the original, including new or altered segments, map and warp features, and in-game currency along with a new upgrade system, and a plethora of additional pages as well as a tracker locating each of them. You could tell they took a lot of inspiration from Mario Odyssey in terms of capturing that 3D collectathon feel to a modern demographic. And I found myself having a lot more fun completing each world in this game compared to the original. That's not to say this is a flawless recreation, and I do still have some complaints with it, be it minor or major. For instance, I do kind of miss the tome expansions. If the staff felt obligated to include some form of backtracking, these expansions would have made it a bit easier to stomach. On top of that, it made the worlds feel a lot more fleshed out and alive. From a narrative perspective, it reminds me a lot of Sonic and the Secret Rings, where the villain tries to erase the stories of the Arabian Nights. Here, the tome expansions allowed for it to return to its normal state after you collected enough pages. In some cases, it felt like you were actually accomplishing something by collecting all these pages. But at the very least, having the worlds be fully realized as well as being given all your moves from the start means you can complete each world on your first visit, which I prefer. I also kinda miss the old UI. I know it clearly looks like a rip from Banjo, but it was so cheeky I couldn't help but smile at it. At least they kept the sound system of Banjo. There's also some sections that received major changes, and there are some I prefer to the original compared to this one. For example, one section I feel was botched in Replaylee was the Cardos missions. People complained how the original was a frustrating and tedious part of the game due to its controls of the camera, but after playing Laylee and Replaylee back to back, yeah, I think I prefer the former. Most of the mechanics were watered down here since you could only jump and fire limited ammo as opposed to speed up and slow down when needed, which made it less interesting to play. But while you're given more pages here, getting the last one requires a flawless run, meaning you need to get every gem and not get hit at all. And I'm really not a fan of that. The original had some room for error, but nothing hurts more than making it so far only to miss a gem or get hit by an enemy, forcing you to start this mission all over again, making these one of the weaker pages of each world. But by far my biggest complaint with the game is that I wish they took the time to add maybe 1 or 2 new worlds to this game. I'm happy with the worlds we did get, but I feel like there could have been an opportunity to add another one, given the creativity of a couple of them. Other than those and maybe a few more nitpicks, I consider this to be a significant improvement over the original while still managing to stand on its own alongside its competition. It really does take a follow-up to turn a good game into an amazing one. In fact, going back to the worlds, this is the first case where I could say there wasn't one that I actively disliked playing. At worst, it ranges from okay to mediocre. So let's dive into what this game has to offer with every world in Yooka-Replaylee ranked from worst to best. As for the rules, I'm focusing on the worlds in this version. Initially, I wanted to factor in the original, really delve into the comparisons, but I feel like it would just overcomplicate the video and I'd rather not do that. In terms of what counts for this ranking, there are no exceptions this time around. Everything is fair game. And most importantly, these are all based on my opinions and you may disagree with me on some of them. And if so, then that's fine, and I wouldn't mind hearing yours in the comments below. But anyways, with all that said, let's get started with the ranking. Like I said, there aren't any worlds in this game I consider to be bad. But at the end of the day, I had to put one of them at the bottom, and for me, Glitterglaze Glacier is unsurprisingly the one I liked the least. So, what are my problems with this world that puts it at the bottom? Well, to start small, from an aesthetical standpoint, this is one of the weakest in the game. Don't get me wrong, the level itself looks beautiful, from the icicles and snow particles to the tower architecture to the skybox. But beyond visual fidelity, it's just your generic ice and snow themed level with not that much to differentiate it from the others. It's hard not to draw comparisons, especially since these are the same people behind Freeze Easy Peak. What doesn't help is the lack of interesting NPCs. Of the characters unique to this world, the Snowman, Boiler, and Hot Top have no personality to speak of, and for a game that likes to be cheeky and meta at times, that's pretty underwhelming. Sure, the boss has some interesting and funny dialogue, but that's more the exception than it is the rule. This makes the whole world feel more empty and lifeless, which I don't think was the developer's intentions. Maybe they could have taken better advantages of making it feel like something that used to be thriving, but has since been abandoned for years and buried under snow. But then there's the whole layout of this world. The central area is supposed to be a lake section, and as you can guess, swimming here isn't that fun. If I find myself using the buddy bubble frequently whenever I want to go underwater, you know it's a problem. There's also parts that never made sense to me, like why do I need to blow up this block in order to turn on the grapple and climb the tower when the bomb berries are found on said tower and not down here? The fact that it wasn't that way in the original is even more confusing. There's also this entrance between the top of the waterfall and the other end of the level, but you need the snowplower transformation in order to get through there because a bunch of snowballs are blocking it. And it wasn't like that to begin with either. At least they did add in these vents to make climbing up the waterfall much easier, but it doesn't change how navigating this area can be a hassle. I didn't even use the vents to go up since I could just teleport there quicker. And that's all just the outside area. I didn't even mention the isometric palace.
Adorable.
I don't have a problem with the labyrinth design and the isometric perspective, but the freedom of exploration is pretty much non-existent, and you don't even get a map indicating which room goes where. I can imagine newcomers getting completely lost in here without a guide. What's worse is that some sections are completely locked up with progression gates. You need to beat the boss in order to warm up the palace and melt the ice covering the pathways. Again, it wasn't like this in the original. Meanwhile, the indoor sections outside the palace aren't exactly anything special either. The crystalline cave only has one easy mission and the Ghost Rider platform, and nothing much beyond that. This one cave section that was open in the original has been relegated to another room section, and I don't get why. And the gloomy gem grotto seriously fell hard for me. The original felt like a fun challenge that tested your platforming as you light your way forward and make it to the end. Now it's just a top-down angle section where you open each gate with a button, and it's not as interesting or fun to me. But of course, the most important aspect of these worlds are the objectives themselves. In the case of Glitter Glaze Glacier, it's a mixed bag. The highlights for me are the pages that test your platforming, whether you're jumping through hoops, flying through hoops, making your way through a cold cave, lighting bonfires, collecting red coins, riding sonar platforms, or getting to high grounds and grabbing a high-up pagey within a time limit. There's also a couple of collectibles that require the snowplower transformation, and I'll admit it was kinda cute running around as the snowplow. And thankfully you only need it for one snowman's hat instead of all 5. Which is a good thing considering it was my least favorite mission in that world in the original. But back to the pages, there's some decent ones in the isometric palace, like this one where the pagey pretends to be a game show host and asks you questions regarding the game or the decor in the room. It's a unique mission that felt fun and satisfying. And the boss fight against Breeze Block was a solid challenge, having to use the scorch berries to melt him down to size while avoiding his projectiles. That's not even mentioning the Rextros arcade game, catching all 5 of the Ghost Riders, or collecting all 8 of the puzzle piece pages. Then there are some pages that straight up suck. There's one where after fighting the boss, you have to push these buttons on a rotating platform in order to open the cagey, and it's really boring. Also, after melting the ice block in the bottom entrance, you go there and all you need to do is defeat the big jellyfish enemy. That's it. Then there's this really dumb one where you have to spam the buddy bubble in the hot tub. I literally had to pull out a guide in the original because I could for the life of me never figure out what you were supposed to do. The worst of the bunch, however, is this one where you have to enter through a series of doors where going through the wrong one sends you back to the beginning. And all for what? Destroying all these crates within a time limit to find a pagey. Also, from what I can tell, there are no hints on which door goes where. So it's basically just trial and error. Fun. Overall, Glitter Glaze Glacier is the textbook definition of a mixed bag. It has some solid missions that saves it from D tier, but not enough to make me look past its shortcomings, whether it's the layout, aesthetic, and some of the weaker missions. I feel like if they tweaked those a bit more, it could have stood alongside the other worlds no problem. Still, the fact that this is the lone C tier just goes to show how great the rest of the game's worlds are. So really, there's no other place to go but up.
And begins your career at Honex Industries.
It's hard to really talk about Ivory Towers and what makes it a solid world. This is the main hub of the game, but unlike Gruntilda's Lair or even Isle of Hags, which felt like gateways and actual worlds, you can explore and complete different objectives just like any other world. Ivory Tower scatters a bunch of pages under different challenges that either test your platforming or spatial awareness. You're incentivized to explore the different locales, whether they're on the beaten path or off to the side. In the original, you learn different moves to make your way through different areas or get through the following worlds ahead of you. But now that you have all your moves from the start, you're no longer restricted to a linear route from World 1 to World 5. You are required to do the first one, but depending on your routing, you could also do a later world afterwards. In fact, during my run of this game for footage, I found myself collecting every Pagey from Shipwreck Creek to the outside towers, and even taking on Capital B before making my way to Capital Casino and Galleon Galaxy, which I do appreciate. And the missions themselves range from admittingly easy to pretty fun. Whether you're knocking down a domino of books to push a big button, charging against the wind to reach the Pagey tied up to the fan, chasing down this Pagey after freeing it from its cage, you name it. There's also 3 bonus retro arcade levels, all of them being fun and challenging and great additions to the ones from the other worlds. But of course, there are some duds like this one where you slowly roll through a toxic pipe and get this one Pagey, or push this golden golf ball into a hole on the other side. There's also this Pagey where you're supposed to climb to the top of the building through sonar platforms, but you can easily cheese it by unlocking the gate between the top and the outside and jumping onto the ending proportion and grabbing it there. Simply locking it inside a cagey and having a button or timer would have made it more interesting as well as challenging. It's a big oversight that I'm surprised none of the developers catched up on. Lastly, of course, we have to talk about the final boss fight against Capital B himself, and oh boy, he's no pushover. He'll constantly shower you with projectiles, requiring you to use them against him to knock him down. Each phase he'll throw in more projectiles to a point that it can get really difficult and overwhelming, but not to a point that it feels unfair. Compare that to the original, where he had specific attacks and maneuvers that were interesting on their own, but when combined, made it impossible to not get hit and likely die. All in all, I found myself having fun taking on this boss, and I'd call it my favorite one in this game. But back to the world itself. In regards to the layout, I think it's decent. Even without Mark's warp zones, I didn't find it too confusing to navigate. Plus, there are a few different interconnections for means of fast travel between floors, as Mark can only teleport you to warp zones on said floor. But that last part is one thing I kinda don't like about this world. Say if you're short on some Pageys when going to Capital B. If you want to go back to, say, Tribal Stack Tropics to collect any Pageys you missed there, you need to take the interconnected path or teleport to the mark closest to one of them. And you'll likely have to do it again if possible just to get there. Any casual players who aren't going to 100% a world on their first visit might not be into that. Another complaint I have is that I kind of wish there was a bit more than just Pageys. In the original, there were 10 quills, a power extender, and a butterfly booster. I get why they got rid of them, since quills can be used to acquire these extensions in each main world, but it does make it a bit hard for me to rank it above worlds that actually have more to attain, Glitterblaze aside. They could have maybe snuck in some Ghost Riders or a couple of puzzle piece Pageys, but at the very least they did increase the Pagey count from 20 to 50, so the exploration and accomplishments are still there, but beyond that it doesn't feel like fair comparisons. What else is there to say? Well, I like the aesthetics. The combination of industrial set pieces and hexagonal motifs makes them stand out more than they would have without them. The outside towers especially sticks out as my favorite, with the nice skybox and the toxic tunnels. The cutscenes after opening each Pagey gates are cool, with the back and forth between Capital B and Dr. Quack being funny and charming. Yeah, that's about it. It's an overall good world that works as a solid hub area while still tossing some opportunities for exploring and collecting Pageys during your visits. Nothing more, nothing less.
An ogre from a swamp. Oh, how original.
Moody Maze Marsh wasn't exactly a highlight for me in the original. I didn't find the aesthetics pleasing and navigation was a bit of a pain. But here, it's actually grown to be another solid world in my eyes. Not amazing, but better than what I expected. One thing I liked about this was how each section was its own unique challenge, and here, not only is most of it retained or improved in some cases, but they also snuck in some new ones in places previously unused, such as the roof of the electric maze section or climbing to the top of the boss's building to nab a Pagey. Little rewards for thinking outside of the box and or finding your way to the end. It also helps that the rest of the missions in this world are solid. Not every one of them is a winner, like this fog section is kind of whatever, and the fan section, while improved, still wasn't my cup of tea. There's even some that are laughably easy. Heck, they even make a joke about it. But the rest of them are definitely a lot of fun. The other challenge rooms are solid, whether you're swimming through currents through gates, racing through doors before they close, or making your way through the end of a platforming section through sinking slope platforms. Some of them also sneak in some hidden Pageys, which managed to trip me up, but not in a way that it feels unfair or bullshit. Same thing goes with the puzzle piece pages and ghost riders, as they're placed in good locations, like this one that rests behind the entrance or this one hiding in a lone mushroom. There's also some pages that require the piranha transformation, which has always been the funniest looking one to me. And the challenge room it's attached to is another good one. One omission I do kind of miss is this one challenge room where you had to push all the buttons down, but I could take it or leave it. The Cardos mission is also interesting. You had to take different branching paths so you can grab all the gems, and I actually managed to beat it on my first try when getting footage. I'd still rank it as one of the weaker missions in this world since missing it can be quite a hassle, but there's still a little bit more room for error this time around. Finally, there's the boss fight against Trail of the 10th Eye Cole. Wow, that's a terrible name. But at least the boss fight itself is anything but terrible. It's a fun challenge that kept me on my toes with its attacks, and the setup behind it is also pretty funny. Really, they're great objectives that make exploration feel worth the time. Which is a good thing, because the layout is probably the one thing holding this back in B tier. It's a bit complicated with different branching paths, and not that much in terms of interconnected ones outside of Mark's warp zones. Meaning there's likely going to be plenty of instances where you're going back and forth between each locale. But to compensate, they kept the design a mostly one-floor layout, reserving the multi-tier platforming for segments off the beaten path, like the tree climbing and fiery platform sections. But in the original, they had these pipes that made fast travel that bit easier, whereas here they're completely gone, which is why I recommend you activate the Mark warp zones as soon as you see them. Aesthetically, I consider this above average. It captures the swamp theme while throwing in a bit of color. In the original, it looked a bit vanilla, but here, the addition of more vibrant colors beyond the greens makes it stick out more to me, all while still retaining the swamp-like atmosphere. Other than that, there's not much else to say about this world. All they needed to do was tweak the layout a bit, and I would have given this an A no problem. But for what it is, I still had a good time with it. The objectives themselves are what carry this world for me, and the aesthetics are a definite improvement over the original. I think B tier is the best I can give this one. But now it's time we move on to the A tiers, the worlds I really enjoy.
Legends of the Hidden Temple.
As far as starter worlds go, Tribal Stack Tropics is an excellent one. I'd even say I prefer it over Mumbo's Mountain and Mayhem Temple. No offense to those two, but Tribal Stack feels less like a glorified tutorial and doesn't block your progression as much. A majority of what you can do here is open to you upon arrival. You can go to the temple in the center and grab a flying pagey, you could save this skeleton tourist from being cooked, you could even take on this world's boss. Anything is up to you. Not everything, mind you, but a large chunk of this world is available for you to explore to your heart's content. And none of it feels like the game is holding your hand or telling you where to go. Unlike in Mumbo's Mountain, where some sections require you to learn the 3 moves included there, or Mayhem Temple, which locked about half of the stage behind a progression gate. Even in the original, what's open to you even prior to the expansion is still more than what both those worlds had, which is appreciated. At the same time, it lets you learn how to platform and utilize your moveset at your own pace, especially since you have a vast amount of moves at the beginning of Replaylee. And it helps that the missions themselves not only adhere to what it's accomplishing, but are also fun and challenging on their own. Sure, it does have that first level syndrome where some are standard and easy. Like on your way to the boss area, there's this really easy pagey where you have to avoid the flames, but it's harder to fail at this than it would be to succeed. I get it's the first level, but still. I also do miss this one section in the tribal monument where you had to use the different slurp shots to make your way to the exit, whereas here it's just another standard top-down angle section. Not bad, but I do prefer the original. There's also this one where you had to find the correct sonar platform with a button to open the cagey, which is just stupid. Not to mention it has my least favorite transformation in the game, the flower. It moves incredibly slowly, its method of attack does 0 damage to enemies, making you a bigger target, and any sort of substantial usage you would get out of the transformation exclusive is slim to none, such as talking to NPCs that give you no useful information in this one page where you have to chase down a group of bulb flowers and have to spray them. Talk about a bad way to introduce the transformation mechanic. On the other end, there are 2 races against Nimble, which I found both to be fun. While I did like how in the original you had to balance the energy meter by grabbing the butterflies as you went, they try to retain some of the challenge by having you race against more of them and have you use the reptile rush to try and catch up to or rush past them, which becomes harder with the ice version. The boss fight against the Great Rampo might be a little repetitive, but he does still provide a solid challenge, having you race to the top while avoiding logs so you can break his teeth. And I'll give it the last phase does amp a bit of it up. The shooting gallery, Rextro's arcade, the gem hunt, and the red and green coin missions are also great. The green coin missions especially stick out as one of my favorite recurring missions in the game. And of course you have the puzzle piece pages and the ghost riders, all in good spots that don't feel unfair but still challenge one's spatial awareness. On top of that, it helps that the layout of this world is great. The ground level is open to navigation and no space feels wasted, while most of the complicated navigation is in the tribal monument with its multi-floor layout and various different objectives. But it also knows not to be too complicated that it overwhelms the player or makes routing an endeavor. And I never felt like I got lost or anything. Really, the one section that is the most complex is Nimbo's Mountain, as you can use him to alter the layout of the main area by adding more water or freezing it. But even then, all it's required for is one mission, that being the second Nimbo race. Beyond him, the rest of the monument is very straightforward with different challenges and or objectives that test your platforming and timing. Whether you're taking the splash berry from far off and rushing back to this vent to wash it, or using the slurp state to make your way through these vents to make it to the top. For the first world in the game, it's nice that it finds the perfect balance of easing players without sacrificing the challenge or freedom of exploration. And while aesthetically, it may not be that special or unique compared to some of the other worlds in this game, it does its job of doing it the most with its tribal theme, and it does still look solid. When I got around to playing Replaylee for the first time, I was impressed by the visual glow-up, especially since I played and completed Laylee not long beforehand. Makes me wonder what they could do for another follow-up. Overall, I think this was a great start to the game. The missions are mostly great with some exceptions, the aesthetics do their job and look nice, the layout finds a good balance of being digestible and complex. Aside from a few weak missions, the transformation, and a couple other nitpicks, I don't have that many complaints. You know you succeeded as a starter level when you get me excited to see what's to come later on in the game.
Now that sounds like Robot Pirate Island!
If I was to rank these worlds solely for their aesthetics, Galleon Galaxy would no doubt take the top spot. This is just a gorgeous world. Combining a pirate and outer space theme with the starry ocean, different islands and planets, and the various set pieces such as asteroids, rings, docks, and ships. It's a visual marvel, both in terms of fidelity and substance, and I just couldn't take my eyes off it for even a second. So aesthetically, I'd give it an S+. But this ranking, of course, is also about the layouts and objectives of each world. Thankfully, Galleon Galaxy passes for both categories. For the most part. Yeah, I'll just throw out my one complaint that's keeping this in A tier. The layout suffers a bit from the landmarks being disconnected. I'm not saying I have a problem with them being spread apart, that's fine. But the methods of getting there are a bit, I don't know, arbitrary? Considering how in the original you learned the Flappy Flight just before you made it to this world, navigation heavily relied on it, and your only other method of navigating between each sector is the pirate ship transformation, allowing you to swim through the water without taking damage, and giving you 3 methods of offense. This is carried over to Replaylee, but this time there are a lot more places to transform into the pirate ship. Since the Flappy Flight has now been restricted to a power-up, Plus Mark is pretty much in almost every island, making fast travel that bit easier. But it kind of feels like the same problem I had with Moody Maze Marsh, where I felt heavily reliant on it. Plus, outside of its specific missions, I never felt incentivized to use the pirate ship transformation. Heck, I'm pretty sure I used the Flappy Flight power-up more than the transformation, because I felt like it was much more efficient. This doesn't completely ruin the world for me to a point of being tedious or frustrating, because the landmarks themselves are actually pretty fun and immersive. Which brings us to the missions themselves. Most of them range from good to excellent, and I can't really think of an outright awful mission on the top of my head. Well, that's a lie. The Carlos mission is terrible. Not only is it the slowest of the 5 due to the low gravity, but it requires such precise timing and platforming to a point that it feels like sheer luck if you manage to pull it off. I mean, look at this. I phased through the railroad. Are you kidding me? How do you expect me to shoot down these barrels and then immediately jump onto the railroads if you're gonna phase through them? But aside from that one, yeah, I think the rest of them are really great. I like the Knights of Camelot mission. Phasing through these force field gates and then blowing up this giant planet is cool. The Nimble Race was as solid as ever. The golf course is surprisingly decent. The puzzle piece pages are well hidden. Sliding through the velocity terminal can be fun. And the boss fight. Holy crap, is Planeta such a good and challenging boss. And the setup behind it had me laughing on the floor. Honestly, if they altered the layout a bit and had bridges connecting them or platforming sections, this would have had a much better chance of being in the S tier. But the aesthetics and the missions themselves are enough to put this as my runner-up for this list. Not much else to say except I hope for more worlds like this if there's ever a sequel. Now, I'm not one to gamble. And if you asked me to go to a casino, I'd seriously have to think long and hard about it. So, the fact that Capital Casino not only ranks as my favorite world in the game, but also the lone S tier, I won't lie, I'm impressed. This is the world that passes for all three categories. The aesthetics are great. A casino-themed world is unique and they just go the mile with it, having you explore it as if you're a tiny person in a life-size casino. But most of the big stuff like the house of cards, fountain, poker chips, and dice are just a decoration. Like Capital B just said, go nuts with the interior. At the same time, some of the set pieces are just the right size for you to use, such as the slot machines in this museum. It might not be as out there as Galleon Galaxy, but you really can't look at this and call it bland when there's this amount of detail. And it helps that the layout is straightforward with no dead ends or blocked paths. And any points of no return are relegated to the challenge rooms. In fact, to further prove my case, this is the only world in the game where I didn't use any of Mark's warp zones. Like, think about it. They had to add those in to make exploration feel more manageable. And I find myself having to use them a couple of times in all the other worlds. But I was having so much fun exploring this place and completing the different objectives. And navigation didn't feel like much of a hassle to a point I didn't feel the need to use the warp zones. Would it have made completing this world much faster? Maybe. But you know how fun it is to explore a world if you don't want to leave so quickly. Which brings me into this world's greatest strength, the missions themselves. What makes this world separate from the others is that you don't get pages directly from completing objectives outside of stuff like the Rextro's arcade game or any of the Ghost Riders. Instead, you're actually given tokens, and exchanging 5 of them will nab you a pagey. I really like this detail. Not only does it fit the casino scene, but nabbing tokens feels just as satisfying as nabbing a pagey. Not to mention the missions they're tied to can be pretty fun. Each slot machine has a little gimmick to it, whether the button stops a different panel compared to what it's in front of, or this one where you had to hold down a panel until it matches the one in the middle. That's not to mention the challenge rooms, where you race through the doors before it closes trying to avoid electric shocks. Shooting down each of the panels in a specific order, reptile rushing your way through these glass panels to get a card, or using invisibility to make your way through security and reflect these lasers. Oh, and did I mention the roulette wheel, the memory game, and the golf course? They're all also pretty solid. Maybe not that special, but still good for what they are. And exchanging every single token you have for pages feels so good.
See that? I don't even look back. I just keep walking.
Honestly, I can't really think of a bad mission in this world. Even the Cardo section wasn't all that bad. Sure, you still had to collect every single gem in a perfect run, which I'm still not a fan of. But at the end, they actually surprised you with a boss fight. Honestly, I thought I was gonna dread it, but no. Inept was a really fun boss fight. His attacks kept me on my toes, all without it feeling like sheer luck or bullshit if I end up dodging his attacks or hitting him. Even in the original, while I wasn't kind to him at first, once I got the hang of it, I started to appreciate this boss a lot more. So while I did have to do a perfect run, which wasn't exactly that fun, I'll take it if it means getting to fight this actually fun and challenging boss. Also, how can you not laugh at the setup and dialogue behind this boss? Oh, and I almost forgot to mention the Ghost Riders and the puzzle piece pages, or the helicopter transformation, allowing you to fly through the air and shoot cannonballs. Just, man, this is such a fun world. Capital Casino is one of those worlds that could definitely rival some of my favorites from Banjo-Kazooie. The layout is excellent. The theming and aesthetics is amazing, and the missions themselves are fun as hell. I genuinely can't think of any issues holding this world back for me. And even any complaints I would have, like the first half of the Carter section, are all so minor that they're pretty much cancelled out by all the positives. Because of all that, Capital Casino earns the title of my favorite world in Yooka-Replaylee. So there you have it. Every world in Yooka-Replaylee ranked. I wasn't expecting to make a video about this game, considering I didn't think there was that much to say about the original. At least stuff that I think was worth talking about. But after playing the remake, it feels nice to throw in a little small video talking about it. With how there was only 5 worlds, not counting the hub area, it makes sense to throw in an appetizer in between some of my more larger projects. And with how I'm applying for masters this year is going to be quite an interesting roller coaster. But hopefully it doesn't take away from making more videos like this. But only time will tell. In the meantime, if you like this video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe to my channel, as well as hitting the notification bell to be notified when my next video is coming out. Also, comment down below what your favorite and least favorite worlds in Yooka-Replaylee are. Until then, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.